Hello everyone, nice to see everybody. This is sort of a last minute video that I put together because so many people are talking about the recent ban in Russia against the Jehovah's Witnesses organization. And I can imagine that a lot of witnesses are feeling, freaking out about it because after last summer's regional conventions, all the bunker videos that they were showing how this poor gentleman in Russia, or he certainly had a Russian accent, was the horrible life he'd led and all the persecution he'd faced. And so it's definitely at the forefront of their minds. So when they see this happening, I'm sure it triggers PTSD. It certainly is triggering that in a lot of XJWs as well. So people are worried, and understandably so. But that's why I thought it was important to put together a video that talked about the actual facts to help people understand a bit more background about this. For example, Jehovah's Witnesses are not the only religion being targeted in Russia right now. Last year, in fact, last July, the Scientology religion was targeted, and they were told to liquidate themselves within 6 months. I know the Mormons are also another organized religion that has been investigated, and they've had a lot of restrictions placed on them as well. So, and there are countless others. Basically, it's any non-mainstream religion in Russia right now is being investigated, and with the idea of clamping down on some of these religions. So I think that's an interesting thing to point out, because witnesses like to feel, actually all these organizations like to feel, that whenever something like this happens, it's persecution, that God is behind it, or God is, I shouldn't say God's behind it, Satan is behind it, but that somehow this fits into God's plan. And unless you feel that God is also operating through the Church of Scientology or the Mormons, then I think it's safe to say that this is just simply something that is happening in the world. It has no relevance. It has no bearing on the end of this system of things. And it is certainly not persecution. Secondly, the other thing I thought was interesting when I did a bit of research is that Russia has actually been under ban more often than not. I think from what I remember, I was looking at actually the JW CD-ROM. And from what I remember, I think they started being under ban in 1917. And it went all the way up through to 1991. After the Iron Curtain fell, I remember in 1991 is when Russia regained their status, where they were free then to worship as they wanted. And they had various international conventions there, and a lot of the work opened up, not just for Jehovah's Witnesses, but also for Mormons and all these other organizations as well. And then what happened was there were various court cases, because they were still, even though they had the freedom to worship, there were still various court cases going on where they were being accused of various things that are really not right, like criminal activity and violence and things that really make no sense. If you're going to charge the religion with something, you shouldn't be charging them with trumped up charges that are completely fabricated. And that's where they fell flat. But at any rate, they were rebanned again in 2004. And then it was only in 2010 that the ban was lifted on the organization. So they've only been, operating outside of a ban since 2010 in the most recent years. So again, it's something to realize that Russia is used to living this way. I'm not saying this is any way for anyone to live. I'm just stating that this is not anything really new for them. And it's not necessarily a sign that people should be, heading towards their nearest bunker. So this whole subject and how it's being handled by JW.org has really got me thinking. I mean, this is an organization that claims to be no part of the world. They don't vote, and they have nothing to do with the politics of this world. If you were to ask them to lobby the government for some current cause, they would say no. They'd say, no, we're neutral. We would wait on Jehovah to fix it, and we'd wait for his kingdom. So why then are they lobbying the government now? Do you find it kind of odd that that their organization asked them to write letters to Russia, to the Russian government, to lobby them not to ban the organization? Let's have a look. So here's a copy of the letter for their letter writing campaign that went out to all congregations worldwide. As you can see there, it says that they feel it will have dire consequences for the over 170,000 brothers and sisters in Russia. The second paragraph talks about how the fact that they want to draw international attention to these matters. So that's why they want you to write a letter to Russia. I love how I've highlighted from the last paragraph, as we put our complete trust in Jehovah. But we'll write letters anyways. And on this sheet here, you'll see these are the instructions. I've just highlighted a couple things I thought were funny. They're saying, add your personal signature to the letter. Use your personal return address on the envelope. So they want you to put your name and your return address and everything on it, which I wouldn't want to do personally. Not when you're dealing with Russia. No thanks. But then if you look further down, the next thing I've highlighted says, do not mention the names of individuals in Russia who are Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah, that wouldn't be too smart. And like I said, I wouldn't want my name and address given to them either. But they want you to do that. And then they just state what some of the facts are. If you look at the last sentence on the page here, it says, this means that the branch property in St. Petersburg and kingdom halls throughout the country could be seized by the state. And I think that's their biggest concern, as always, right? It always boils down to the money. From what I understand, I have actually seen a letter where the organization is trying to cover themselves in this regard. They're trying to transfer the property's ownership into the names of elders within Russia. And it's unfortunate because, well, I know, like I said, they're concerned about the money. I don't blame the organization for trying to cover themselves, but I do think it's unfortunate nevertheless. So the question I have is, well, why didn't the organization ask its members to write to Russia in January when the country decriminalized some forms of wife beating? Here's a country where every 40 minutes they say a woman dies from spousal abuse. No, they prefer to wait on Jehovah then. But when their assets are being threatened, okay, then it's okay to lobby the government. That's when they will take action. Got it. So money and bad press seems to be the main motivating factors to get this organization to change. You know, it really reminds me of whenever there's a natural disaster. The organization, this, so-called charity, will help only its members, those related to us in the faith. If by any chance they actually do help someone, although shout it from the rooftops, so look how we helped this old person and they're not even a witness. But generally all they provide is lip service. And yet they're a charity, like the Red Cross. If they really believe that persecution is a sign that they are on the right track, a sign that they are truly God's organization, then why are they intervening with God's plan? Why don't they wait on Jehovah like they do with whenever children are being abused or wives are being abused? The other point that I want to discuss is the accusation that Russia made that the Jehovah's Witnesses organization is an extreme group. Let's see what the organization had to say about this on their website. The first one there from Heiner, the former UN special person. If Jehovah's Witnesses are extremist, I think we all are. The second one, the only relationship between Jehovah's Witnesses and violence is that they have been victims of violence. And the third one, if Jehovah's Witnesses are extremists, then most versions of Christianity could be accused of the same thing. Well, I think that these individuals are as educated on JW matters as Dr. Monica Applewhite, the so-called expert hired by JW.org for the Australian Royal Commission, who slinked off in shame after her erroneous testimony was thoroughly debunked. I would say that the Jehovah's Witnesses organization is entirely different from most mainstream Christian religions. And that's not a good thing. I mean, here's an example. You tell me if you think this is an extreme religion or not. So here's something that I've heard many times The same story. It's a story where you've got a husband and a wife. One is a Jehovah's Witness and one is not. They have children together and they end up getting divorced. The children visit the father, who, let's say he's the Jehovah's Witness. And when they visit him, he makes them feel that they need to get baptized. The end is coming. And that if they do not get baptized, they're made to feel that he's going to have to shun them. Then they go back to their mother and are made to feel that if they do get baptized, they're going to have to shun her. What kind of a sick organization would put children in the middle like that? As if it's not bad enough that they're children of divorced parents, but they're made to feel that they can't win. One way or another, they're either going to be shunned by their father or they're going to have to shun their mother. That to me is absolutely sick. And believe me, that is an exact situation that I have heard many, many times over. These poor children are crying. They're miserable. They're becoming depressed. It's mental torture to do that to anybody, to make them feel that they are stuck in a situation where they absolutely cannot win.
Jehovah discards the person like a piece of garbage.
This is from last summer's convention. So they just announced that this girl's been disfellowshipped. And look at the looks her parents gave her. Just a look of almost hatred. The poor girl walks away. Later in life, she has 2 children, but of course her parents aren't talking to them. She tries to reach out to them. She tries to call her own parents. Her mother picks up the phone. Oh, who is it? Oh, her. Yeah. I won't talk to her. I won't talk to my daughter, and I won't talk to my grandchildren, and I'll carry this out for 15 years, they said. Doesn't even know her own grandchildren. Finally, the poor girl caves and says, you know what, maybe I'll go back. But they'll put her in a back room, a glassed-in room, because she's a leper, basically. She can't talk to anybody. She's got to be singled out, even though she's making the move to be a Jehovah's Witness again, because she couldn't take the ostracism and the mental cruelty of being singled out and left shunned in such a horrible manner. So when it comes to extremist groups, obviously we've got different categories of groups, different levels within these groups. I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses are not known to blow up shopping malls or behead people. They prefer more of a Chinese torture approach. They prefer to use mental cruelty on their members. Anyone who doesn't listen, anyone who questions, anyone who doesn't do exactly as they're told. I mean, as Jesus said, it's easy to love your friends. The sign of a true Christian, though, is somebody who can actually love their enemies. And this is where the organization falls flat. I've even heard victims of physical abuse say that as horrible as it was to go through the physical abuse, they would prefer that to mental abuse. Physical abuse, they say, yes, you have scars, but you can see the scars. They're tangible, and you can heal from these scars. But mental abuse is a whole new ballgame. It can ruin your life and any relationship you want to have afterwards. You have a messed up view of the world and a messed up view of the people who tortured you in this manner that afflicts you for the rest of your life. And, you know, when somebody is shunned, it's a life sentence. I mean, it's one thing to be shunned for a year or two and you don't talk to your mother or father or your child for a year or two. You can cope with that. As horrible as it is, I'm not minimizing it in any way. I'm just saying it's something you can cope with. But when you're dealing with the rest of your life, knowing that your family and friends are done with you, unless you come crawling back to them like that girl in the video, and even then you're made to sit in a glass room, segregated from everyone. You know, why don't they just put a spotlight on you? Loser, you know, shunned. For a whole year, apparently, she had to endure that. And she's lucky. Some people have had to endure it for 3 years before they finally get welcomed back into the fold. Another way in which I would call them an extremist group is the way they hide pedophiles. They don't outwardly hide pedophiles, but through their policies, for example, of the 2 witness rule specifically, where they would actually allow a second child to be sexually abused before taking any action. Isn't that crazy? How many pedophiles have they hidden? Because, well, nothing can be done. We'll leave it in Jehovah's hands unless we have a second person come forward. So now 2 children have been raped before they're willing to do anything. You know, when you think about what happened in Australia, okay, so I'm just going to throw some statistics at you. There was over 66,000 regular publishers, according to last year's yearbook in Australia. And over a 60-year period, there was 1,006 pedophiles that were not one of them was sent to the police. If you look at Russia, where last year's yearbook said they had 170,000 publishers. Using that same formula, that means that there are 2,575 pedophiles in Russia. And I know these, yeah, it's not easy to come up with a formula. I did, but I'm not sure how accurate it is. And plus, I don't know how much I would compare Russian culture to Australian culture. I would say there's probably a lot more based on the differences in the cultures. So we're dealing with upwards of 3,000, 4,000, or 5,000 pedophiles in Russia, where not one of them have gone to the police. So it's not a safe place for children. And I think suffice to say, it is not a safe place for children. Not only because of all the hidden pedophiles, but you've got a culture where the outside world is bad, but we're safe in here. You see, we're Jehovah's spiritual paradise. So you don't have to worry about pedophiles here. You don't have to worry about crimes here. Yes, there's the odd bad person, but for the most part, you're safe here. Right? And you wouldn't want to take a brother to court because that would be bringing reproach on Jehovah's name. So with all these different things that go on in the organization, it's a perfect storm then, isn't it, for pedophiles? It's a horrible and very unsafe place for children. Allowing perfectly healthy people to die by refusing blood transfusions and then having to lie about it is another example of why I believe the Jehovah's Witnesses are an extremist organization. I'll give an example of something that happened actually in my very area. This beautiful young lady, Eloise Dupree, was so excited. She and her husband were about to have their first baby. They were both Jehovah's Witnesses, but while giving birth, she had complications, had to undergo an emergency hysterectomy, and was put into an induced coma. She needed a blood transfusion, but refused. The kicker is that her non-JW family had no idea what was happening, and by the time they arrived at the hospital 6 days later, the elders who were part of the hospital liaison committee refused to let her in. Eloise Dupree died and left behind her husband and her beautiful baby boy named Liam. He will now grow up without his mother. The hospital liaison committee goes home to their families and can live the rest of their lives together without ever thinking of this poor child who has been left motherless. And every day of his life, he will be reminded of that. Her extended non-witness family are trying to change the laws here regarding the blood cards and consent. I also saw online that many Jehovah's Witnesses were spreading lies about what had happened. They were claiming that she died of a staph infection and not from refusing a blood transfusion. But the truth is that if she'd had a blood transfusion, she would have had the strength to fight the staph infection. Instead, she was so weak, she succumbed to it. I know this because I spoke to those involved. What you're looking at here up on the screen is an article about this tragic story from Maclean's magazine. It's basically the Canadian version of Time magazine. I put it up here so you can read it if you'd like. So why were the witnesses here resorting to lying? Stand behind your cruel extremist policies. Obviously, they see them as cruel too, or they wouldn't have resorted to lying about it. Next, we have the bunker videos that were showcased at last summer's regional conventions. I don't know about you, but when I watched those videos, they sure seemed like a doomsday extremist cult to me. So this is what I'm talking about here, the bunker series of videos. Just so very doomsday cultish. And then look at some of the things that they say in their publications. Like, look at this Watchtower from 1988. It says it might be possible to have almost no contact at all with the relative. Even if there were some family members requiring contact, this certainly would be kept to a minimum. Wow. And then look how they talk about worldly people, as if they're so much better. It really sounds like they are the Pharisees. While some contact with worldly people is unavoidable, at work, at school, and otherwise, we must be vigilant so as to keep from being sucked back into the death-dealing atmosphere of this world. Let the world go along in its way, reaping its bad fruitage in the form of broken homes, illegitimate births, sexually transmitted diseases such as AIDS, and countless other emotional and physical woes. That's from a 1987 Watchtower, September 15th. I mean, they really make it sound how horrible the world is, like they're so much better. And then listen to this one here from a Kingdom Ministry of 1974. Reports are heard of brothers selling their homes and property and planning to finish out the rest of their days in this old system in the pioneer service. Certainly this is a fine way to spend the short time remaining before the wicked world's end. Again, doomsday cult. And so as you see, this is from 1974, when they were expecting everything to end in 1975, which of course it didn't happen. So this so-called short time remaining, people who sold their homes, like my father, who was a father of 3 kids, I was one of them, had to really struggle when they realized that the organization, the doomsday cult that they are, was completely wrong. So as I've mentioned earlier, the Jehovah's Witnesses organization is not a violent organization, but more of a passive-aggressive one. Having your friends and family shun you for the rest of your life is mental cruelty, and it's torture. And it has resulted in thousands of suicides. We shake our heads when we think about doomsday cults like the Jim Jones one in Guyana, where 900 people were killed or committed suicide. But the Jehovah's Witnesses organization has left behind way more victims. How many people have committed suicide? I can only guess, but I personally know of 6. There's been estimated that 50,000 people have died by refusing life-saving blood transfusions. And then you think about the tens of thousands of pedophiles that the organization has hidden. How many lives have been ruined as a result? In the past, Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia have been charged with criminal activity and with violence. But this isn't right. It's not right to make up trumped up charges against them. What they really should be charged with is for the hiding of pedophiles through their 2-witness rule. The policies that do this. This is where they are heinous. Punishing members who refuse blood transfusions because of the policies that the organization has. And they should be charged with wrongful death suits as a result of people who die when they could have been saved. They should be fined, and they should have their tax-free and charitable status removed, because this is an organization where money seems to talk. Money seems to make a difference. So hit them where it actually hurts. The shunning is wrong, and they should be punished for doing that to others. I know that the witnesses believe that they are completely innocent. I know because I was once a witness, and I felt that I was on the right side of the fence. And they believe that anything negative said about the organization must be a lie. But it really reminds me, or they really remind me of soldiers who commit war crimes and are thereafter held accountable. Claiming that they were just following orders is no excuse, is it? Witnesses need to open their eyes and look at the trail of victims that their organization has left behind. Blindly just going along and saying that they're just obeying the organization or just obeying Jehovah, just doesn't cut it. Not when they are willfully closing their eyes to the realities of what is actually happening and what their organization is actually doing. And the victims of abuse are told even that the elders who have committed these horrible, heinous crimes, they're just imperfect. Well, what are we? Do you think we're perfect? Isn't it funny that they're so quick to judge anybody outside their organization as if we're horrible and from Satan and breathing in Satan's system of things, as we read in that publication. And yet when they commit heinous crimes, they're imperfect. You can't have 2 sets of scales. Even the Bible says that. Again, they need to stop and look at what their organization is doing. What is the fruitage the organization is producing? It's bad. They are an extremist group because of all the things that I've listed here. People should be able to believe as they want. That I agree with. But freedom of religion is not without its boundaries. JW.org has definitely crossed the line into extremist territory, and they need to be curbed. So thank you very much for watching this video. We're going to pay attention closely to see how events unfold. And I hope to see you again another time. And thank you very much. Please like and subscribe. See you again. Bye-bye.